Hello and welcome to the Rally Point with Dominic Fielder, the author of the King's German series, and myself, Rob McLaren, the author of the Jobert series. Hello, Dominic Fielder.
Hello, Rob McLaren. How are you?
I'm very, very well, sir. Very well.
Rob, I can't let you go without saying congratulations on book number 5, is it?
It, it is. It's number 5. There he is. Yes, it's really always exciting to hold your own story in your
Yeah,
hands.
absolutely, Rob. Yeah,
Thank
very,
you.
very, very well done. I'm genuinely envious and looking forward, A, to the feedback you're going to get about it, which will all be positive, and to book number 6. If you finish your number 6 before I finish book number 4, I'll have a word with you.
Each month at the Rally Point, we catch up with friends who enjoy the Napoleonic period. Now we record the first 30 minutes of the gathering, but once the recording is over, we remain online and the conversation continues. This month, we would like to welcome Karl Weiss to the Rally Point. Karl is a Napoleonic specialist, is based in Bamberg in Franconia in Germany. Karl, welcome. Welcome to the Rally Point. How are you?
Well, I'm fine, and thanks for having me again.
Hans Karl, I'm going to ask this question from a really safe distance. You want to talk to us about light infantry tactics, and surely light infantry tactics only emerged with the British Army. And I'll go one further. In my wargaming circles, the Prussians are known as the excuse army. Hopefully you can shed some light on why neither of those things are true.
So I like to do the Prussian and the Saxon light infantry of 1806, and basically we have the Jäger, we have the Füsiliere, and we have the Schützen, and hopefully I can cover organization, their arms and their tactics. Not only in English language, it's a popular view and well entrenched that the Prussian army of 1806 did still adhere to the rigid lines of the 7 Years' War, that their impeccable battalion valleys fizzled out in the autumn fogs at the battle at the Saale River, and that the soldiers stood rigid while being shot to pieces by French skirmishers. However, when we look a bit back in the French Revolution, already Prussians fought not without success against the French and in large actions as well, notably Kaiserslautern in November 1793. The Fusiliers, then light infantry, taught some sharp lessons at high tuition in marksmanship and skirmishing. In particular, the Jäger, barely respectable when the war began, won a reputation as a fighting force, second to none on either side. And that's from an article of Frederick, of the book edited by Frederick Schneid, and the author is Walter Skowalker. He wrote really good stuff about the Prussian army, and there are very good English sources around. In the book edited by Lechieri, Napoleon and the Operational Art of War, Dennis Kowalter again wrote a very good chapter about the Jena campaign, Aboucherie and Berry-Hellion, and he states the Prussian army of 1806 can reasonably be described as well into the process of adapting to the new ways of war developed in the previous decade. In comparative terms, it was where the Austrians stood 3 years later at Wagram. Not until at least 1810 would Britain's principal field army stood immediately before Jena Auerstedt. But in October 1806, that level would prove uncompetitive, above all on the operational level. And that's the cause why the Prussians lost the campaign of 1806, not by the lack of light infantry, but the extreme mistakes in the operational art of war. So the Prussian had as light infantry, the Jäger, the Füsiliere, where they called Füsiliere before 1787. They were usual line infantry, but after the death of Frederick the Great, the new king changed the Füsiliere, the name, into light infantry, and he created new Fusilier battalions, while the old Fusilier regiments, they became line infantry. And then you had the Schützen. There were shooters, both in the Prussian and the Saxon infantry, and the grenadiers, the musketeers, and the fusiliere who were light infantry already, but still they had the Schützen, and they were specially trained, and they had a rifle, with the exception of the Saxons. They just had only a normal musket. But we'll cover these in detail. The Prussians, I will start with the Jäger or Feldjäger, and they were already formed in 1744 with a small company, and they were recruited from huntsmen. So they were trained to hunt game, and they were gamekeepers, and usually they were employed by the state, and for that reason they hardly had any people to desert. And of course, when you're hunting game, you had desirable skills like knowing how to hit. You could stalk game, lie in ambush, and they tried up to 1806 mostly recruit the Jäger from those people. And the Jäger units, they increased from this small company up to 12 companies in 1806. And they were usually divided in 3 battalions for organization. And they had two sort of commanders, one of the chef who belonged to the Feldjäger Corps, the proprietor, and the commander. The Jäger were not employed usually as a corps of 12 companies concentrated, but there were most likely then later, like the Rifle Brigade or the 60th, the 5th Battalion of 60th British Infantry. Also, companies were given to like advance guards or for other duties. So in the main armies, they try to concentrate them, like 4 companies, 5 companies, 3 companies. But for advance guards, usually one company was attached to the advance guard. Now about the armament, the Jäger, they had a rifle, and they simplified it. It had a simple lock. It was not any longer a hair trigger. And as a sidearm, they had the Hirschfänger. The Hirschfänger was a hunting knife, which could, however, be fixed to the rifle barrel. So in emergency duties, they had something against for hand to hand, but that was not the main issue. The main issue was to fire aimed shots. So I gave the details here, and there were several methods to load the rifle. The most accurate one was the batch ball. This needed a long loading time, but they were very accurate, and they could hit single targets up to 300 meters and beyond. When there was not enough time and you had to load in a hurry, then they used cartridges which were specially designed for the rifles, so they still could have a good accurate shot by using the fields and grooves of the rifle. Each Jaeger company had an ammunition cart they carried along with them, so they could always cast balls for the rifles. Here you see such a Jaeger rifle, and usually quite traditional German style, octagon barrel. And you see here the fields and grooves and the usual lock. It has the Jaeger rifle still had to be loaded first with powder on the pan, and then they charged the powder down the barrel. And they used a specially fine powder for the pan, so when the flint sparks, you had a very sudden explosion in the pan, and then the shot was pushed very quick out of the barrel. Here we see how the Jaeger looked. They had a light green coat, Finch green, and green was the usual traditional color of the Jaeger, of the huntsman. And that's a parade dress. In the field, they looked a bit differently, but this is a very good print from Doppler of 1806. Okay, so the Jaeger were trained to fire aimed shots, and it was not for them to fire quickly. For that reason, they fought usually in pairs. So two Jaeger formed a team, a rear and a front man, and when one just shot, the other was guarding his comrade. And only when the comrade had reloaded, then the other one could shoot. So you always had one Jaeger in reserve with a loaded rifle while the other one was shooting. And as I said, the Jaeger, they were trained in skirmishing for the attack, the advance, on the halt, and the retreat to reform quickly in case of emergency. And their aim was to occupy terrain like lightning. Um, the skirmishers line, they could be formed from a column as well from the line. And usually the odd Züge, which is a platoon, a section or a company, that could be used. So you would not always use when you have one company and you would employ them as skirmisher. Usually you would maybe start with a fourth or only the half of the strength to form into skirmishers and to keep the rest in reserve. York, which was later then very famous in 1812 and 1813 to 1815, he became the commander of the Jaeger, and he shaped them very well, and he disciplined them, and he created a very uh, powerful fighting force. And they proved their mettle in the 1806 campaign. And as I said, the Jaegers were attached, like in company strength, for example, at Tauentzien's Corps, when they had to fight at Schleiz, and while bigger units, they fought with the main army. The Jaeger, they fought with distinction in the 1806 campaigns, and the French really respected them, and they got the nickname the Jäger with the Strick, because on the right shoulder they had a rope, a cord, and that was the nickname, which was derived from the Jäger. Now to the Fusilier. In 1786, Frederick the Great ordered to raise 3 light infantry regiments formed from the from the free regiments. But then his successor, Frederick William II, ordered to increase the light infantry because he realized there was a lack in the Prussian army, and he created 20 Fusilier battalions in February 1787. And those were now light infantry. They were formed in 4 companies for the battalion, and they were only formed in 2 ranks. So also they adopted the green coat in contrast to the Jaeger, which had a light green. They had a dark green. And they got a specific drill regulations in 1788, especially only for the light infantry. In 1795, they were increased to 24 battalions. As I said already, they were 4 companies strong. They were fighting in 2 ranks only. And the Fusiliere, they were armed with a smoothbore musket, which was a bit shorter than the line infantry ones. Additional to the Fusiliere, despite they were already light infantry, they had the Schützen, which I will come back later. The Schützen were armed with a rifle. So the Fusilier battalions, they had Fusiliere traditionally armed with a smoothbore musket, but they also had part Schützen with a rifle. Unfortunately, the battalions of the Fusiliere there were not attached to standing divisions. So there was no mix of line infantry with Fusiliere, but they were sorted out for special duties or were formed 3 battalions to form a small brigade, something like this. And this had, of course, fatal consequences in the 1806 campaign because there was a lack of a combination of light infantry in combination with line infantry, and the Prussians learned from that because in 1808, then when the new line regiments were formed, you had 2 musketeer battalions and 1 fusilier a battalion in a regiment. In 1806, they had no tents, as well also the Jäger, they had no tents. And the Fusiliere, they left behind the battalion gun, a 3-pounder. They didn't take it into the field in the 1806 campaign. There we see a Fusilier musket. You see it's usually a Prussian musket style, the self-priming gun, a self-priming pen. You see the protection from the sparkling flints. And it was the same, identical to the line infantry, but it was shorter. Had also the same caliber. Here you see the Fusiliere again in the parade dress of 1806. A print of Doppler again. You see the dark green coat. And as a sidearm, additional to the bayonet, they had the so-called Faschinenmesser. And when you look at it, it looks almost like a machete. So you could use it for cutting wood and was very usable for field work. Here you see it in campaign dress, and they wore the cartridge pouch as the line infantry. They usually in the field in 1806 they had linen overalls. As for the Jäger, also they were designated to fight in mainly in woods, hill villages, form advance guards, rear guards, protect the flanks, and keep the opponent's light troops at bay to keep them away from the line, so to protect them. And the instructions of 1788 were revised in 1798. And so they could form as light infantry in dispersed order, and they could form in close order. And again, the usual way in the Prussian army was that skirmishers they fought in pairs, and it was identical to the Jäger. So one was shooting, the other stood guard, as long as the other finished loading, and then only the other one could fire. The signals were given by hunting horns, and the distance of a fusilier to each other was 4 to 5 paces, and there were 100 paces in front of usually of the formed troops. Here again, an example of the 1788 regulations. So again, you see a fourth of the company would be used to bring out the skirmishers originally from the flanks, but this was revised in 1797. So only a part of the flanks of each platoon. They were sending Fusiliere directly to the front so they could deploy into skirmisher order very quickly. And yeah, they could, as I said, form skirmisher order, but they could be recalled back, and then they could also fight again as line infantry. We see also about the pace, because usually it's believed that the Prussian army was very slow marching. But when you look at the step, it was 108 paces a minute, and it was faster than the French, who had only 100 paces. And also the Prussian pace was longer than the French pace. So the Prussian pace was about 4 inches longer than the French. So again, it's a myth that the Prussians were slow in marching. They were as quick as the French, of course. in battles. These are drill regulation procedures, and then usually infantry marched at a different rate regarding what the ground was proving. Also, again, the Prussians, they changed the art of firing when they had to fire in line, in contrast to the 7 Years' War. While in the 7 Years' War, they usually used battalion fire. In the 1806 method, they used fire at will. So again, a change because they believed when you fire at will, you had a bit more time to aim on your own will and your own time. But this proved to be completely irrelevant because when you're firing in rank and file and you fire elbow to elbow, usually you cannot aim and usually you cannot hit. Now, the very interesting part of the light infantry, the Schützen. So the Schützen, they were, if we translate it literally, they were shooters. And the term Schütze is still in use in the modern army as a rank in the infantry. And they were introduced in the Prussian army in 1787. Each infantry company of Grenadier Musketeer and Füsiliere had Schützen. So they had 10 Schützen in each company, as well as a Schützen NCO, and they were usually drawn together to form a sort of a Schützen platoon. So when you have a battalion in the Füsiliere of 4 companies, you have 40 Schützen, 4 NCOs, 1 Schützen officer, and usually hornist, a bugler. They were recruited from the best shooters, and they were armed with a Scharfschützengewehr, and that's a bit intermediate between a rifle and a smoothbore musket. It was a rifle carbine. The fields and grooves were not cut as deep as on the usual Rager rifle, and they fired with a cartridge. It was designated that these Schützen were later to become NCOs, and there was a bit controversy, a bit discussion in the Prussian army because they said if you're a good shooter, you usually will become a good NCO. And what the funny thing is, when you were an NCO in the Prussian army, in the Grenadier and the Musketeers, you used a sidearm, and all your skills you were taught, they were lost when you became a NCO. So that was for Grenadiere, Füsiliere, and for Musketeers. Then for the Füsiliere, Pellet, he was a section brigade commander. He said, "Well, we waste the Scharfschützengewehre of our NCOs because usually the NCOs that don't shoot, they just control." So he said, all battalions of my brigade, they will give the NCOs will give their Scharfschützengewehr away to other Füsiliere, and they use their smoothbore musket. So he increased by this his Schützen up to 88. So a Prussian Fusilier battalion had 88 Schützen with rifle. And it's discussed that some people say, yes, it was introduced for all the Prussian army, for all Fusilier battalions. Others say maybe not, but we know from one battalion, which was not in the original brigade of Pellet, that they also used the same system of 88. So I think this was the organization for the 1806 campaign. So you had 88 Schützen with rifles, And by this, they could, of course, hit much better than the usual Fusiliere with the smoothbore musket. Um, very interesting is also that the Prussian Guards, they increased in 1805 their Schützen by 10 additional reserve Schützen. So instead of having 10 in a company, they all then had 20. The next interesting thing also is that when they introduced the Nothart musket for several battalions, for those who listen to my talk about the smoothbore musket, um, they used then the Nothart musket. Now, interesting is how were these Schützen trained? How were they deployed? And again, they were deployed and trained like the Jäger. They fought again in pairs. We have the second, you see that the second was placed behind the first one in intervals of about 2 paces distance. The Schützen were about 6 to 7 paces apart. As I already said again and again, the Schützen fought in a pair. They fight alternately, one guarding the other, and the only other one was only shooting when the other had loaded and at the ready. In case the battalion had to defend a position, the Schützen were placed about 100 paces from the formed line infantry to delay the enemy and hopefully to cause disorder. In case a regiment or a battalion advanced against the enemy or hostile position, they were again placed about 100 paces in the front, also to inflict casualties and to disrupt the enemy if possible. In case the battalion is closing into a firing distance, they were withdrawing to the flanks, in case of need, reformed behind them. In case they had to skirmish against enemy cavalry, they shouldn't be detached more than 20 to 25, 25 to 30 paces distance. Further duties were to cover the regiment at the march, to patrol, to be on outpost duty, to secure villages for woods, to do reconnaissance. Very often it's said that the Prussian army of 1806 was not trained to occupy villages, which is complete nonsense because fortunately we found a report of the regiment Grevenitz and where they gave detailed information about the training. So the new Schützen were trained 6 afternoons to get accustomed to the bugle signals. All Schützen were trained 5 days long how to interact with the battalion. Then again, about the meaning of the signals, how to use the different rear sights of the Scharfschützengewehr and how to judge distances, how to occupy a village and conduct patrols, how to dislodge the enemy. And they used enemy presentations. So they had mock battles like in modern maneuvers in modern armies, how to dislodge enemy from a ravine, how to occupy a ravine, how to occupy the mill, how to assault villages, how to make sorties. So this was a lot of training going on because from 1795 onwards, Prussian army, of course, had stopped fighting, with the exception maybe against the Poles. But otherwise, they had no direct fighting experience against the French. But they thought out teachings how to improve the skills of their Schützen. As I said, the Schützen were armed with a Scharfschützengewehr, and it's interesting again. It had a rear and a front sight, and the rear sight had a distance you could flip over for a sight for 150 paces and for 300 paces. About 10,000 of them were produced. In contrast to the Jäger rifles, the Scharfschützengewehr ended in a round barrel, so you could attach a bayonet. The Schützen also, they used a usual infantry cartridge, and they were not loading like with a Jaeger, like with a patch ball, but they used a normal cartridge, and their rifle caliber was a bit shorter, a bit smaller than the caliber of the usual musket. So the ball was had a tighter fit. So they could that they hoped by this then that it would be okay. So the lead would press into the fields and groves, and they could produce by this a spin and achieve a better result in firing with the Scharfschützengewehr in contrast to the smoothbore. Also, they had a Krückstock or crutch, which is a short stick to use for rest. And they carried this in the 1806 campaign, which I will show. First, you here see the Scharfschützengewehr. At the back octagon, front, you see the round barrel, and you could fix a bayonet, and you see the fields and grooves. I said already about the Nothart musket. I will don't touch this topic. It's too complicated, I think. And here you see the Schützen with the Schützenstick. And as you see, this is unfortunately a print from 1792 or 790 because I couldn't find any of 1806, but they carried the stick into the 1806 campaign, and it was attached to a button on the labels, so they had both hands free in case of need. The Saxons also had Schützen, and that was actually their only light infantry in 1806. Saxons had neither Jäger nor had the Füsiliere, and the Saxons, they introduced the Schützen in 1793 for all line regiments, and also they increased it later to 10 Schützen per company. So the field organization of 1806 fixed a battalion 4 companies strong, as well for musketeers and grenadiers, and this resulted in 40 Schützen per battalion. It was almost identical organization as the Prussian army. You would also have Schützen NCOs, Schützen officer, and also a bugler. Originally, it was planned also that the Schützen should have a Scharfschützengewehr, but the Saxons never realized it, and the Saxon infantry, as Saxon Schützen, used the usual infantry smoothbore musket. Interesting also, when they were in a skirmish line, the bayonet was not fixed. Only when they were standing in reserve of being employed in close order, then the bayonet was fixed. So when the bayonet is fixed, the center of gravity is of course moving forward to the barrel. So they thought when you don't have fixed bayonet, you could point and aim better. And also, like the Jäger, they would not usually employ the Hirschfänger attached to the barrel only in dire need, because also again it would impinge aiming. The Saxon Schützen, they did wear also the same infantry uniform as the musketeers, and they had a great plume as distinction. And it was so similar to the Prussian kind of fighting that, like at the clashes at Schleiz, the Prussian and the Saxon Schützen, they fought together. Out of these Schützen, then in 1809, there were the light infantry regiments were formed. All I could find was this print about 1805. The green plume is missing, but here you see the Schützen. You see they are not they have no fixed bayonets. You have the bugler. This, however, is not the uniform of the 1806 campaign. In 1806, they were a sort of a kittel. All infantry and artillery were a kittel, which is a sort of a smock. I could not find an appropriate image about Schützen, so I used Perry miniatures. I painted, and there you see how the Schützens would look like in the 1806 campaign. This is the kittel. Um, the Altzuler musket again was a musket with a self-priming gun, so it could self-priming pen, so it could be loaded very quickly. Now we come back to the sources, and to my surprise, there are some very good English sources, but I think they're usually ignored. I don't know why good sources are ignored and bad sources are read. So I just flip through them. One of them, I think a very good author is Danish Skowalter or Schowalter. I don't know how his name is pronounced. And he wrote a very good chapter in Schneid's Warfare in Europe, the Prussian Army in Decline, um, from Hubertusberg to Auerstedt. And he just looked into the development and the reforms of the Prussian army from the end of the Seven Years' War to 1806. The identical author also wrote something about the Jena campaign, where the Prussian army, in my opinion, is shown in a much better and realistic way, as it is usually shown in the established books like Chandler or Petrie. Then, of course, you have Pascal Bressonnet, is a French officer who originally published his book in French, but fortunately it was translated by Scott Bowden, and it's called Napoleon's Apogee. He especially deals with the Saalfeld, Jena, and Auerstedt campaign, and in my opinion, it's a must-read because he very clearly shows the difference between the Prussian tactics and the French one, which were not that much different. They were there, but not that much different. And of course, my own book, my own chapter in Glory is Fleeting about the Prussian light infantry of 1806, where you can read up all these details, information I gave now in much better detail. And the most and best book is the book by Kurt Jani, Die Gefechtsausbildung der preußischen Infanterie from 1806. And he really discusses Prussian infantry firings, tactics from 7 Years' War to 1806. And he includes a huge amount of battlefield reports, of action reports, after action reports of Prussian light infantry also. For Saxons, you have unfortunately only German sources. I mentioned already Jörg Titze. And also Titze translated the Unterricht für die Scharfschützen, the training of the sharpshooters of the Saxon army of the year 1804. So you can learn in great detail how they were trained, how they were performing shooting, how they were how they did deploy into skirmishes. Now, altogether, one of my main axes to grind is Auerstadt. I don't know why nowadays Auerstadt is always in vogue in all English podcasts. People are just, I don't know why, they cannot refer to the real name. And the real name is, of course, Auerstedt. As we all know, Davout is Duc de Auerstedt and not Duc de Auerstadt. So in case somebody says Auerstedt, I just say best is press tilt stop, because what you will listen to is usually myth reported about the Prussian army of 1806, which was altogether very different than it usually is presented in the German and the Anglo-Saxon language. Better go with the authors in English I showed above, and then I think you can form a good opinion about the Prussian and Saxon army of 1806. Now I will stop. It's complicated, but I'm here Very looking forward to listen to the questions. And of course, I could only touch the subject very briefly. In case you want to know more, please read the chapter I wrote about Prussian light infantry in 1806.
Just asking about to just clarify my own mind, Hans Karl, when he said about 1806 Fusilier battalions, they're fighting separately to the line battalions in separate brigades.
Yes,
Is that
unfortunately, the Prussians, they introduced in, I think in 1806 or 1805, they formed divisions. But usually the Fusiliers were not attached to a division of infantry. Like when the division of infantry was made up of 4 line infantry regiments, usually would think they may attach 1 or 2 Fusilier battalions with them. So in case of need, you would have light infantry at hand. But unfortunately, that didn't do it. And I came back to the comment of Mr. Schwitzer, because the problem was the interaction. And very often when they were in need, they were not there because they were on the flanks, they were in the rear, they were guarding whatever else. And so they were not there in the battlefield. So the only intrinsic part of an infantry unit were the Schützen. And then it was about 40 to 50 Schützen in a battalion, and even they were stripped off. So like there was a wood, then they would take the Schützen away. They would form ad hoc Schützen battalions. They would say, okay, you clear the wood. Now the line infantry was there, then they were attacked by French skirmishers, and they were stripped of their intrinsic skirmishers, and they had nobody to deal with the French allied infantry. However, when you look at Wellington, he did the same. He took away from his line infantry battalions, he took his light companies to form ad hoc light infantry battalions. So it was not that much different to the way the British fought, but they used it. I say the Brits used it better, and the Prussians they just couldn't find out, because of 10 years of peace, how to interact better with light infantry and line infantry.
Right. Okay. So you've got that idea of so skills at battalion level and basically skills at brigade level, but the problems with the Prussians are still those.
Yeah, it's for example when you look, for example, at Schleiz, which was at advanced guards battle. So all the Schützen were taken away from the line infantry battalions because they had to cover a rough ground at the flank. So then the line infantry they had no light infantry at their disposal any longer. The Jäger company was used to defend the churchyard, so they used it a bit like old style Ancien Regime. So the interaction of a formed unit with light infantry, this was not fully developed in the Prussian army. Then they learned from their mistakes. And as I said, in the 1808 or 1809 formation, a line infantry regiment had 2 battalions of musketeers and 1 battalion of fusiliers. And also the 3rd rank then was trained for skirmishing.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Fascinating conversation so far. I'm about to end our recording, but please stay online as we continue the chat to wrap up this month's Rally Point. Thank you, Karl Weiss, for joining us. Thank you, Karl.
Thanks for having me. It was a difficult topic, and hopefully I was not confusing you too much, but now we have the chance to discuss after the recording.
Yes, it was very well presented. Thank you. For those of you who have joined us here live this evening, thank you for your time with us. Next time, why not join us here at the Rally Point next month, when we're catching up with Stephen Summerfield, who is going to introduce a 4-part series on field artillery. Simply contact Dominic and I for your Zoom invite, and our details are at the end of the video, and share Rally Point with your friends so we can hear from them as well. Now, any previous Rally Point chats are up on our YouTube channel, and if you've enjoyed this Rally Point, please leave a quick review. So it's good morning from me, and it's good night from him.
Good night.